Okay, so this is, frankly speaking, June the 29th.
So bad with dates.
Is it Wednesday,
Yes, it is
June
Wednesday.
the 29th?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Okay, this is Chief Carlos Hampton. This is nobody Michele Peterson, and guru of all things Andy Sweet. What number is this? This is our...
Number 30 for us
3.
sitting down.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is number 3? It feels
4.
like we've done like 30 of these.
4 if we count the public, open forum session.
Oh, 4 if we count the open forum. So this is, frankly speaking, over at the Archway Building in East Chattanooga. We're trying to give people an idea of what it's like to start from scratch. I always like to tell people I'm an entrepreneur from scratch, which means that I became an entrepreneur and a business person without anything, barely any spoon. I did have a plastic spoon when I grew up that my parents gave me, and they certainly gave me the shelter and structure that I needed to be able to fail and get back up and shake it off and go do something else and have the confidence to be able to fail. And so now everybody, I guess, say hey in case we have new visitors for this particular podcast on June 29th if they listen to it in October. So Carlos, you start. Who are you, Carlos Hampton?
I always start. Let's let Andy start.
Oh, okay. You go ahead, Andy.
All right, I'm Andy Sweet, and I don't know that I'm the guru of everything, but I do like to dabble in bits of everything from athletics to science to business and entrepreneurship. So, I try and keep the expertise broad.
Pretty good.
And so I'll jump in. I'm Michele Peterson. Like I said, I'm an entrepreneur from scratch. I bought this building over an Archway and let the kids, did a contest for $500 and broke that contest up from a branding perspective into who named the building and who designed a logo for the building. And I did that because I was tired of picking up the newspaper and turning on the local television and watching kids slaughter other kids in this neighborhood. So we are in East Chattanooga, a predominantly, up-and-coming community. Definitely has its challenges when it comes to territorial regime of street pharmaceuticals to gangs to
Yes. Street pharmaceuticals.
a lot of people over here self-medicating themselves because they probably have had a run of bad luck and some bad decisions, and we're trying to help any way we can by bringing the message that a lot of these solutions can come from government and marketplace working together. So it's a natural fit that my next person, again, that is going to tell you a little bit about himself is Chief Carlos Hampton, Battalion Chief Carlos Hampton. And so I'm going to pass the baton to you, Carlos, and you tell people who you are.
I am Carlos Hampton. I do work for the Chattanooga Fire Department at the capacity of a battalion chief. I'm also a local entrepreneur of Two Wheels Towing, Tennessee, father, husband, friend, just all around guy. Definitely love what's going on here. Love the community, real people. Most of them have no political background or influence, so what you get is just that, what you get. And we're looking to broaden the horizon, to flip the whole concept of crabs in a barrel out and put the crabs on the beach and let them be what crabs are supposed to be, full potential.
That's good. And so today, as with the last, this is our third in the box, talk to one another, just
in the
about.
box. I like that.
I know,
We're
in the box, man. Talk to each other about anything and everything. But today, let's try to hone in on what we experienced and what we're trying to do together. So one of the things that after the purchase of the building, very organically, we partnered with Glass House Collective, which is Teal Tebow. We try to promote Teal as much as we can, and certainly her team of I don't know that I would call them renegades because that has a natural and possibly negative connotation. They are really people that are very passionate about trying
Missionaries.
to. You think they're missionaries?
I think the missionaries, they're in a foreign place. They're trying to do better, bring the people to a better place or whatever. That's basically it, right? People from somewhere else coming to somewhere, and
I think that that's probably a good name for them, except for the fact that sometimes missionaries can have such a religious connotation to it that, and I don't get the impression that they're using religion over there. I think that
I
they're
don't either. Okay, let's try Crusaders.
Crusaders,
crusaders. Okay,
educators.
Is it also religious?
crusaders kind of have some militant religious.
Is it? I went the wrong way with that, didn't I?
We got to come up with a new word for the Glass House people as we invite them to join our Speak in the Microphone. But I think the thing is they've been over here, so it was a natural fit. This building was their building.
Yes.
This building had some structural issues that I was able to correct and still share, and we're obviously working together to try to figure something out. So let's just jump into the whole archway concept, which is to take marketplace good practices and introduce that to kids who are really limited on their exposure to what it takes to run a small business. They probably see big business out there and probably have some exposure to millions and billions of dollars are made in the United States, but almost every asset I've ever bought was with nickels, not with dollars. My acumen has been let other people focus on the dollars and the half dollars, and I'll focus on the nickels and the dimes, and eventually through consistency of behavior, I'll have something to show for it. And I think that is what I thought could happen. So Carlos and I were here yesterday together. We started the next discussion yesterday, which has to do with Name That Donut. We've talked about it twice. I have finally secured the private label agreement with Cox Bakery on Broad Street over in the south side of town. Certainly a lot of action happening around her. Her family, Barbara Cox's family, started a bakery there in what I can imagine is the early 20s and 30s and 40s, similar.
Wow.
And then she took it over. Her parents worked there as a family-owned business on Broad Street and probably fed a lot of business people coming off of Lookout and the interstate leading into downtown, donuts and baked goods. And certainly her business model, one could argue it's probably been sustainable because her parents made a property investment, and she's probably been able to compete with the Red Foods and the Bi-Lo's and the Publix because those guys have bakeries of their own and probably make thumbnail cookies and donuts and other things not as good as she does. And so I approached her about letting us carry a donut that she manufactures and let our kids brand it and go out and take to the streets and try to sell it. So that's the next contest here. That contest will pay $500, and we introduced that to her, and she jumped on board. And I think we're down to now. I'm just waiting on a price of what the actual donut cost to make, so that I can run a pro forma profit and loss statement with these kids to show them what the earned potential is from their sweat equity in taking this donut and making it really cool. And I think that's where we are, is maybe talking about that.
Yeah, it's such an exciting thing. And really, we've talked about it a bit, but it's this ground up approach, right? Letting the kids see every single piece, from the what is cost, what can we sell for, what does that margin look like, what's it going to look like, what's the name going to be, where are you going to sell it, how are you going to sell it, how are you going to market it. I mean, that's more business exposure than I got opening my first two businesses, just in explaining that to them and walking them through the process. So it's I think it's really awesome. And I'm excited to see what comes of it. And I'll say on a side note, so I've never been in Cox Bakery, but I happened to be riding by on my bike after a long bike ride yesterday, right past the bakery, and oh my word, it smelled amazing. I
Yeah.
wanted to stop. It made me even more excited about this whole project. So
Well, and I think that the reason Cox is a natural fit is because Barbara understands too that we're all trying to come up with something that gives these neighborhoods that have murky ponds some clarity. That there is opportunity, and there is opportunity, right where they live. But one of the things that I was trying to convey yesterday when I was meeting with Tills at Glass House, we're going to try to take these kids, and Carlos was here, so I'd love to have his insight and for us to discuss kind of why I'm doing this this way. Because Carlos, it's so funny. I've been so used to being by myself in business for so long that I've realized there's so many things I don't talk about in the process because I just don't want things to be in stone. And I realized that yesterday when I invited you over and those kids were here, that I kind of just jumped in and didn't say, this is my logic. If we take these kids up to the Ocoee and we make those kids, we give those kids the opportunity to sign up for the next contest. The reasoning behind that when I woke up Monday morning and posted that on Facebook is because I wanted to kind of get them to understand being in business is very much like running a whitewater rapid, for yourself. That it's going to be other people in your boat that you didn't even know could reach down and pull you out of the water. If you trust the marketplace, can be very beneficial to your success.
yeah, so to give everyone the heads up about that too is talking another initiative of taking some of these kids from the Glass Street area down here in East Chattanooga up to the Ocoee River, which is not far from here in Chattanooga. Classic, world-renowned whitewater river where they even held the 96 Olympics. It's a fabulous experience and one that guaranteed none of these kids have had or might not get a chance to have. So we're putting that together right now.
And what I was attempting to do just now is explain to Carlos yesterday, and I don't think I did a very good job, is explaining the fact that what I want these kids to understand is what we're about ready to embark on is kind of floating down a river. And sometimes you don't have a paddle. And certainly here, a lot of kids barely even have the understanding of the water that they have running under their feet, and all they got to do is stick their paddle in and go a direction and feel safe about it. I think so many times when you see these, I don't know, Carlos, you grew up here. Did you feel unsafe when you were on these streets? I
think depending on where you're from and what you're used to, your understanding of safety may be different from mine. And with these kids, their everyday may be a comfortable place for them, but may be considered dangerous to someone else. I mean, they hear about shootings all the time, and it's like taking a breath for them. And it's never real to that individual until it's them that's been struck or someone that they love that's been struck. So as a child, I can't say that I ever felt unsafe or threatened. Of course, as children, we had fights and stuff like that, but other than that, walking up and down the street was just that, walking up and down the street. My mom would send me from North Chamberlain, which is about 1.5 miles, 2 miles east, east, to this store right around the corner here. And so a 3-mile trek as a 12-year-old, and that was life. So I can't say that I remember feeling threatened or unsafe walking up and down the streets because this was my everyday.
So I guess I wonder, having been over here and been on this roof when several gunshots went off, that doesn't happen on Lookout Mountain.
I'd imagine not. I'd imagine a small community like Lookout Mountain, everyone knows everyone, and the people that stay there aren't the ones you're worried about. You're probably more worried about your transients that come through that realize that some of those homes are held up by elderly individuals or couples or whatever, versus probably younger people, and so they come through looking for those communities. I didn't realize that until me and my wife bought our house. It's an elderly community, a more retired community, I guess. And my truck was broken into, and we're like the only blacks in that community on that street. And so I moved there thinking, well, everything's going to be safe. Everything's going to be safe. And I got up one morning and they pulled my book bag out of my truck, stole my tablet, a couple other items, even went through my spare change, bust the window out. I mean, it was horrible. And the funny thing about that is whenever we moved to that house, all the neighbors were so intrigued by us, you know, because all they knew about black people were what they seen on TV or the news or radio, and all of a sudden you're staying right next door to one. So they knew my name, they knew my wife's name, and we hadn't even really like introduced ourselves to anyone, you know. And so when my
the people around you had not come and introduced themselves, but they knew who you were.
Some did right off, and some didn't, but still knew who we were. Knew that I was a firefighter, knew that my wife worked for the post office, and the whole 9 yards. And some you could tell there was a little bit of skepticism or whatever. But then when my truck was broken into, I made it a point to say, well, I didn't move up here to get my stuff broken into. I moved up here to get away from all this stuff, and here I am on the other side of town, and now my truck got broken into. What are you guys going to do about it?
Well, I
and
think
it was
that's
funny to me.
Just to follow up with that, because, you know, there are different bars on certain communities that none of us can see, right? So I'm from a community where everybody waves. Up in Johnson City, it seems like when you go to the south side of Johnson City and you pass anybody walking or doing anything, they wave. So we had this neighbor on Lookout, I won't say his name, but I went around the corner about every 5 years. I probably waved at this guy 300 times and he never waved. And one day I'd had a bad day, so I flipped him the bird. And forevermore, I had to go a different way, because then when I got my emotions back in check, I thought that was really rude of me. But then I thought he should have waved back.
He should have gave me the bird back.
Yeah, he didn't even give me the bird back. It was like, and what was so funny is that if I had found out that he actually was blind, but he wasn't. But he was kind of blind and being nice. But that's the running joke, is what if he had been blind? I mean, I waved at this guy almost every day for 5 years, and he never lifted his hand. Whereas you can go out to Hinkle, out on the back of Lookout, and everybody waves even when they pass you. And what I've loved about East Chattanooga as a community, even though, I mean, there are parts of me that still sometimes realize I've been here when gunshots have gone off, and it scares me. The overwhelming thing that feels right about being over here is it doesn't matter who I pass on the sidewalk, people speak.
Yeah, they're just people, and of course the news and social media portrays this area as just the slums of Chattanooga, and that's only because of the perception of people that have the microphone. You know, but if you actually take a microphone and you meet some of these people, they're just as genuine as anyone that you would meet across the country, around the world. When I worked over here as a firefighter, I loved it because as long as you talk to someone like there was a person, they would talk back to you like a person. They would give you everything that you asked for with no sense of reluctance. But now when the cops showed up, that'd be a different story, because there's just this phobia about police over here. But firefighters loved them. No issues.
No issues, because maybe there's no accusation in any capacity, that you're just there to serve. Yeah. And I think the police department has a perception that probably goes well beyond what they can even contain or control anymore, because it's generational. And I use the term generational tariffs to describe marketplaces, and it's certainly when I talk about the NCAA and why I began to do this is because I have been appalled at the exploitation of sweat equity in this country, and no one is talking about it. So I have begun an open records request financially because I can read balance sheets that even have 16 zeros on them because you were always taught to just take the zeros away and go down to the root number, and it doesn't really matter how many zeros there are. What the simple truth is there's an exploitation happening at its highest order and no one gives a damn. And so for me, that I thought, well, I can either start this on a much bigger level and spend a lot of energy making very little difference in trying to skip pebbles on a pond, or I can come over here and I can do a contest on branding, and then I can basically attempt to bring a team together that gets this. So what I was thinking about when I woke up Monday morning about sponsoring the trip down the Ocoee is what better example to use that this is what being in business feels like. And so when you're doing a brand that relies on the marketing of perfection, that's the worst thing you can do when you sell something to someone is oversell this deal because nothing and no one is perfect. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's happening in government right now. I think there's been a paradigm shift when it comes to the color of government. And I think that some people don't like that color, and they equate that color to something that those people didn't earn naturally because they never were in business, and therefore they weren't taxpayers, they were tax users. And I think that's actually appalling in the thought process of that, because when you call for a fire, do they ask you your color when they call to get them out of the car or out of the trapped?
No, but I have gone to calls, and I've talked to other firefighters that have gone to calls, and the civilians didn't want them touching them because they may have been black or a different color than what they were. And I've even had calls where in this area, certain paramedics may show up or whatever, and the civilian just didn't want them touching them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Has it ever been reversed? I'm just curious.
Yeah. This a black lady right around the corner. Paramedic showed up, and I think something had happened prior to that, and maybe it was that guy, maybe it was somebody else, but she would not let that guy touch her. I ended up having to actually...
Because he was white?
Because he was white, and I ended up having to ride to the hospital with them because she swore up and down that this guy was going to kill her.
Really?
And I had to ride to the hospital and assured her that if he killed her, he had to kill me too. And that was the only way she was willing to go to the hospital. But now, the other side of the fence, RECs, automatic alarms, what they call them. It's when your detector goes off, but there's no apparent reason why it's going off. We've gone to houses and the owners would not let us in the house, or would not let certain individuals in the house because they weren't their preferred color.
To just check out the scene.
To just check out the scene.
And so I think for me, that level of brokenness, I had hoped was vacating our environments. But then when I realized how many kids I was seeing killing other kids for the opportunity to sell street pharmaceuticals in a certain region, which is what you can imagine is occurring over here. Somebody is not regulating street pharmaceuticals to say, to teach these kids what oversaturation is when it comes to, because the top tier, they're going to make their money no matter what. The top tier of who is benefiting, they're going to get enough dealers to mitigate their risk to go out and sell these street pharmaceuticals just like any other pyramid scheme that works, right?
To some effect. I'd also say that some of it's hatred and not having knowledge of who they are and how valuable they are as people. And that's black, white, whoever. This gang violence thing, I really don't think Chattanooga's that small to where you can't go to this block or that block and make whatever money you want to make, how you want to make it. I think, though, with the concept of gangs, it's just a concept of killing, of shooting, or if you disrespect me, or if you say something bad to somebody that I know, or you diss my girlfriend or my sister or whatever, it's just to the level now to where they're willing to pull the trigger to make that right. The thing is that when they pull the trigger, whoever they're shooting or aiming at, that person has somebody, if not themselves, that are willing to pull the trigger back. And I just really think it's money may have something to do with it, but I think some of it's just a lack of knowledge of self and who they are and how valuable they are as people.
Well, and certainly what we're trying to educate people on, and I spent a little bit of time talking to the kids yesterday, and I just jumped right in. I didn't have any type of script. I certainly had no expectation. I think what I'm trying to do over here is bring something different without any expectation, because in fact, Barbara Cox and we have the same similar mentality when we were talking, and she just said, I just want to help, Michele, whatever I can do, I want to serve. And she goes, if we just help one kid. And I thought, that's fantastic, just to make that for what we're trying to do, because I'm self-funding this, just one person.
Is it me, or are we getting into a society to where we're having more people like that are coming, that are able to help and more than willing to help? I've noticed to where, yes, we've had spike in shootings and murders and stuff like that, but we're also having a spike in people that I guess weren't traditionally expected to help, but they're actually wanting to lend more hands out to say, I'm willing to go this far to make a difference. Is it me, or is it just something that I've just noticed that I wasn't privy to before?
I think there are people. Maybe that number is growing, but there's two sides that I've come to realize in that as well, which is, one of the main points is a lot of people don't know how to really help, and so they go to sources and avenues that actually cause or create no help whatsoever, right? There's so many quote-unquote philanthropic agencies and fundraisers out there that if you actually get down to the nitty-gritty and you're able to look over their numbers, they're collecting a bunch of money, but what they're doing with it isn't helping anyone, right? But people feel okay, like they are helping, but they're not checking out what happens on the backside. I think that's one issue. And the other part is kind of this, desensitization of what people are willing to do, right? I think we're seeing some more people willing to say, give money, but not get their hands dirty. And I think that's another big issue is when are people really ready and willing to put in some sweat equity to help even one person, right? It's like, how often would you be like, oh yeah, here, I'm going to donate an extra 50 cents at the grocery store because they're collecting money for some organization that I don't even know about. Yeah. But then, in another situation, when someone asks you, the physical you, for help, you'll walk the other way. I heard an interesting kind of analogy about that and a kind of philosophical argument, which was, if you're in a business suit, fancy, maybe $1,000 suit, walking down the street, and you see a child drowning in a lake, will you jump in to help that kid, ignoring the fact that you've got this very expensive suit? And most decent human beings would say, yeah, of course, right? In the moment, I'm not going to be there. And yet, in all reality, you could take that same $1,000 that you're about to ruin, and you could help hundreds of kids that you don't know, you don't get to see, and that's an issue because there are ways to do those kind of things. And then the third part of that kind of philosophical conundrum is if there's other people around, it's been shown again and again, they will always look around and see if someone else is going to help first.
And now you got the society now to where they pull the cameras out.
Yeah.
Before they're willing to help. You see the World Star Hip Hop and the other little media sites or whatever, to where instead of reaching in and helping that child from drowning, they'll pull their camera out and sit there and film the child drowning and just watch it.
They want to capture it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's those kind of things, like I can't in my wildest dream imagine ever caring about any like save the person, help.
Well, that's everybody knows that I use this phrase because, again, I'm very troubled by the hijacking of the word God in our society. I mean, that is something that I struggle with every day. I do not struggle with Jesus's message. And so one of the things that I think Jesus talked about was serving the need first. That's what you're talking about. Drop the phone, save the kid, worry about the moment next. Mm-hmm. You know, because the story isn't as captivating if you're talking to the kid about possibly drowning versus actually watching the kid almost drown, and then somebody else takes it upon themselves to jump in, and then you capture that rescue. And that's what I established earlier. What our biggest obstacle here at Archway is going to be is the fact that we really hopefully don't want to make anyone cry or laugh here, because out in the real world, that's what those extremes exist and are already so monetized that it becomes almost superficial if we get here and we don't simply tell kids what I told those kids yesterday, which is first impression is everything. Mm-hmm. If you're sitting up straight and you stand up and you shake my hand, somehow that is conveyed to me and anyone else meeting you that you have value in yourself, not just value in the action of shaking my hand. And that's why I said yesterday I will always remember that Brandon kid's name. Now, he got it after I made it through the first two, that I basically was like, wet noodle.
So he cheated the system.
So what that told me is that he was the self-corrector, because he could have just followed the line to me making him laugh and saying wet noodle, but he was not going to be called wet noodle when I got to him.
That particular kid, I was impressed whenever we were talking about how we were going to feed the kids and get everything squared away. And he spoke up and said, y'all doing it all wrong. Because they were talking about getting with like $10 a kid or something like that. And he was like, no, you're doing it all wrong. What you do is go to McDonald's, buy 2 sausage biscuits. They're only $1 a piece. That way you're in $2 a kid, and you're saving money. And just for him to take the time while his friends were pretty much there in attendance, but not really engaged like he was. I paid more attention to him, especially after you said that he was a good handshaker. But when he said that, I was more focused on him, because that showed me that it wasn't his money, but he was still concerned with it being wasted.
Well, let me extend that. I believe that he was also he was a kid that wanted valuation, not on just what he had externally. He wanted to let us know he wanted to be part of the conversation too by solving the problem.
And I can admire that.
I admired that very much.
Because to me, that shows leadership.
Now, and because we're inside the box, we're going to talk about anything and everything, and I hope that you will be, we're going to be right there with each other. Did you take from what I said back to him about I don't like doing business with McDonald's because I don't believe there's an economic opportunity for you when you do business with McDonald's? It's not that I hate McDonald's. I think McDonald's serves a need in some capacity. But I wonder what your take on that was when I jumped in and said, we just don't do business with McDonald's.
Well, I think it was good advice. I think it was a good eye-opener for him, because maybe that hadn't been presented to him in that way prior to that, which was one of the reasons why I made my suggestion on the transportation, because that again would show something more personal than corporation type.
And I was very short with that. As I said in my text to you, you were right and I was wrong, and I apologize for being, because I think, again, when you operate from a place, my call, my failure, which is what I have operated from almost all my life, because I have liked to run point on things. It's important to know, even in these discussions, as we begin to formulate these things, I too am not someone that can sometimes set aside my control issues and my ego because of the fact that I have been doing this so long. And so you were absolutely right that Robin Davis of Loving Hands who we have had some interaction with, and who by all means and by all ways walks in the footsteps of Jesus by carrying people who were not even insured to dialysis clinics all over the city, because she basically realized they were going to die if they didn't get there, and she didn't judge them for not getting to the bus stop. She actually pulled right in front of them and went up to their front step and helped them in her car. And we forget until you get sick how important helping hands and loving hands are. And I just wonder, in seeing those kids yesterday, if you think we're going to make a difference, because I left here thinking, wow, this is, those kids didn't hold anything back from talking to one another when we were talking. And it's so foreign to me to be in that environment where I want to control them. And so I just jumped right in and said, look, guys, when I'm speaking, don't speak. And I wondered how that came across from a third party like you. I know you care for me, but I want you to tell me how that came across. Because basically, speaking in the box, but we're really talking to one another, Carlos and I right now. One of the things that's so important here is that what happened yesterday is that Gail Mitchell, a neighborhood angel, might as well call her, who mentors these kids and gets them places where they probably wouldn't go without her, brought these 3 kids to be part of the process of the Ocoee trip and figuring out how we get other kids as part of the contest. And I had invited Carlos and Teal at Glass House to be here while we begin to, and her people, while we begin to strategize the budget. So we were putting together the budget. And that's how that came across. So I had a $1,000 budget to go on the Ocoee, which is what I basically was thinking it would take to take about 15 kids plus some adults. Because, a lot of these adults, too, they're living paycheck to paycheck, week to week as well over here trying to help.
Well, and when with bringing the adults in, you're sort of implementing a train-to-trainer concept, to where even when you're not here, they get it as you're presenting it, and they can carry it further when you're not here. So Ms. Gale, she has a very strong relationship with some of these kids, and so with bringing her in and opening her eyes to some concept that she wasn't available to her before, then you're kind of setting the seed or planting the seed in her to where she can be an extension of you.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that I want to know. It's not funny, it's just, how did I come across? Because I don't want to come across as being disrespectful to the kids, but I was pretty amazed at how they just talked whenever it didn't matter who was talking.
If you hadn't been taught better, then how do you know better? And I'll just sit that out there. The generations are closer. And with the parents being as young as they are, a lot of them hadn't been taught. So if you don't know it yourself, then you can't pass it down to your offspring. And 3 or 4 generations of that, then things start to get left behind and left off, and you have that result. But now, with that being said, that doesn't mean that the child can't be trained. It's just that no one in their immediate circle that they trust to listen to has trained them.
Yeah. And not being a part of that conversation yesterday or seeing it, I think it's very important to lay that blunt groundwork for this is how things go. When you're here in particular at Archway, we've talked about that, I think, off recording before, about how this arena, the Archway arena, needs to be controlled. Yes. And needs to have rules and needs to have order, and we get to dictate those. And the great thing is, I think, when these kids are exposed to that, how quickly they will know it coming through these doors, how to act, how to be, how to learn, how to grow. And then the overall hope is that they take that and grow elsewhere. Exactly. As well. Exactly. But if for nothing else, then they know here that is what happens.
So it's interesting that we're talking about this right now, and because Pat Head Summit died this week, and I didn't grow up always wanting to play basketball for Coach Summit, but frankly, when you grow up in Johnson City, Tennessee, like I did, and you play basketball on the courts, and you're female like I was, she was the epitome of who you wanted to play for. Because she established that bar very high that she was the coach. I don't know if men felt that way in Indiana playing for Bobby Knight because he established, that he was who he was and he owned Indiana basketball. But certainly in Tennessee, there was no more pivotal female coach than Pat Summit.
I agree.
And it wasn't until later in life that I realized that I had used and probably listened to her at certain camps or read certain things about her philosophy in life that I probably used a lot, or at least 50% of some of my things in business. And one of the things that I want to establish here at Archway is kind of what she established is it was always easier to get nicer than to start off really nice. And so that too was what I was feeling yesterday from just putting a little pressure on me. Because if you've noticed, Carlos, I haven't really interacted with the kids because I haven't really been sure what I'm doing and how I get across this message.
What you're doing, or what you did yesterday, and that whole concept of it's always easier to get nicer, is the concept that has formed our militaries for years. When you go to boot camp, they tear you down to build you back up. And it's a mental thing. Everyone that comes in there, if you're cocky, if you're timid, if you're this, if you're that, they yell, they scream, you drop them, do push-ups, they punish you here, they punish you there, they tell you you're no good. And then when they get to the point where everyone's on the same level, or they've gotten to a certain point, then they start to inspire you. You can do one more. You can go further. You're better than that. Stand up straight. Smile. Have some kind of dignity about yourself. Polish your shoes off. Tear them down to build them up. And so I understand that. And they won't get it until they're older, but it may be harder to them like right now. You may be harder on them right now. But as time goes on and the relationship starts to form, then, of course, you get a little nicer as you go, because with that being done, you've also instilled a little bit of trust in them. And they trust you. So that bond there, I mean, you really can't help but be nice unless you're just a prick about it or whatever. But that's what's formed our military, like I said, for years. That's the way you do it.
Well, it's interesting because when I mentored those kids before, and I didn't really see any sort of even sprout from the dirt and the water and everything that I was trying to do with the 3 or 4 kids that I mentored initially after my Chinese sheetrock disaster that hit my world. One of the things that I found interesting was that I just was myself. So I would cuss with them and I would do certain things that basically, but I still established I'm the boss, this is what you do, and don't do anything stupid today. Because you're smart enough not to do stuff stupid, you just need to think about things. I think this evolving thing for me at Archway is going to be so different because I need as much structure as anybody in attempting to do this. And that's where I think that, I mean, we're just getting started over here and everybody's asking me, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know, but I know what I think I'm doing.
Yeah, and you're dead on with what you said. Like, you need structure also, and that's human nature, right? We thrive on a little bit of that consistency, right? If Archway to these kids was one day very strict, and you will say yes ma'am and no sir, and you will stand up straight and you won't talk when other folks are talking, and then the next time it's a free-for-all, they have nothing, right? There's nothing to go from. So it's very important in some facets of their lives, in some facets of all of our lives, that it's like, oh, I know when I go there, this is how it goes, right? It's like going to your grandma's house. You know how you act when you're there. And we like that because we know what to expect and we know what happens in that. And again, going back to that arena, like when I go there and I act this way, this is what happens.
And it promotes a lower stress level because the expectations already been set, the tone's already been set. And with some things, yes, you have to be black and white. There is a level of respect that must be maintained. There's a level of courtesy that must be maintained. But just talking to a child that may have an issue or showing a child that, okay, we can do it this way for right now, but when I can trust you a little bit, you know, I'm going to hold your hand the whole way through now. But then next time, I may loosen the grip a little bit. Next time, I may extend you out a little further. Next time, I may let you go and just let you do it by yourself. It's a process. But you're right. I would agree. Consistency and courtesy and respect for self and each other is a must. That has to be black and white. It is what it is. And if they don't want to participate or whatever, then we don't want the bad seeds. We want to help everyone we can, but the bad seeds that are the hardest to deal with.
But I'm kind of the person that likes the challenge because sometimes in people's lives, you get labeled the bad seed through one occurrence.
Yeah. It would. I wouldn't say pick them up, cut them loose, or whatever. But some people, regardless of how much you instill in them, or how much you try to instill in them, you just can't seem to reach them. If it's something going on at home, or if it's something that you can fix or whatever, or help them out with, then that's one thing. The movie, A Piece of the Action.
Yeah, poverty pimps.
Poverty pimps. More times than not, you can help the multitude. But every now and then, just like with always, there's that one person that may be toxic to the whole group. And in order to save the whole group, you have to cut them loose. And you want to bring everyone. But the truth is that you can't.
Well, and there's a wonderful movie, and that's one of the things that I think comes into play here too, is that I'm in the process of trying to buy a van because it's obvious to me that these kids have no transportation. That's the one thing we spent a lot of time yesterday talking about. And so I thought, well, I'll just buy a van. That'll solve my issue, right? And then I thought, well, then I got to have a driver. And then I talked to Robin Davis this morning at Loving Hands about her vehicles and how they were insured. And we're always going to come back to insurance because of what, you know, I mean, insurance companies are definitely our private governance.
Yes.
That you got to read down to the low print because they're going to give you everything on the deck page and take everything away on the 300 pages behind it. And I think what I was trying to say in establishing where we are and formulating this next donut contest is how do we want to establish our roles? Because I guess when you come in the next time, Carlos, and because Andy wasn't here yesterday, I mean, who's going to stand up and tell these kids, because I said it once and then I said it again, hey, don't talk while other people are talking. That's disrespectful. And if they continue to do it and don't realize it, and we're not their parent, how do we go about?
There's a way to reach them. Like I said, for the most part, kids want structure because, like I said, it promotes less stress for them. There's less thought to have to go back and forth on. They know what's expected. They know how to perform, and they know where they should be in that realm. So, it may be a difficult task up front, but I don't see it being a long-term issue. Not with all of them. Like I said, you may have that one or two that may be toxic to the whole group, but for the most part, they're good kids. They just don't know any better.
Yeah, so I had a situation where I took on a kid years ago that belonged to kind of an elevator gang is the easy way for me to describe it. And he was the youngest one at the time. He was 17, and he worked for a company I did business with that wasn't real well structured. Let's just say that without basically, they probably didn't have corporate structure. They certainly didn't have a board. They certainly didn't do things probably the correct way with paperwork wise. But in more southern states, you can get away with that because there's not as much regulation. And that's why businesses have relocated here. They're not structured with unions and other things that come about that drive cost up, especially labor costs. So there's a lot of sweat equity opportunity down here that happens with these mill towns, and certainly in and around Tuscaloosa, Alabama, you had Mercedes, and then you had up in Greenville, South Carolina, you had BMW. Then you had Chattanooga had Volkswagen, and all the ancillary benefit that happens. I've watched in all three of those communities. In fact, all three of them have been very big purchasers of home elevators, and who would have thought, right? But the reality is you had all the chiefs coming in, and then a lot of the Indians figured out how to make money as well. And so you had a thriving, you go to Greenville, South Carolina now versus 20 years ago when I was there, it's just, you go to a little podunk town like Pickens County, South Carolina, that I used to drive through to go to swim meets. And I mean, you can't even begin to understand how those seeds begin to germinate within those communities. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at when it comes to the understanding of marketplace, when it comes to dealing with, because A Piece of the Action instituted that movie when you told me about it and I went and watched it. It instituted that you could actually create your own marketplace just by basically utilizing the kids. You could make money off the kids, right? Because you could come up with some sort of program that you got funding for that created a job for yourself, which is really all entrepreneurship is you're creating a job for yourself. And at that point, what I would like to institute here, though, is the understanding of what I'm trying to do with the raft trip, so that every contest from this point forward that involves 12-year-olds and up starts with the raft trip, and that's what we need to formulate on the board, which is what I wanted people to watch in some sort of video or something to understand what kind of things happen when you're floating down a river and that river begins to run rapidly. And by the fact that you can stay calm, it's why you don't want to talk at the same time that someone else is talking, because somebody might actually be saying something that will save your life and you can step in. But that's coming from all I do in my life is talk.
I think that we definitely need to let the kids know that this field trip is not just that, a field trip, but it's sort of a metaphor to life, I guess.
Well, certainly applicable
business.
to business.
Yeah. So to let them know we're going to do this, but this is to show you in an example. It's going to be an example that this is life. You're moving down the road, and it's going to be smooth sometimes. It's going to get rocky sometimes. It may even throw you out sometimes. But the object is to get back on and keep pushing forward, right?
I think that's the...
Yeah, and I think another really interesting kind of take on that whole the whole idea of this raft trip is to get put into things that are out of your comfort zone. It's a very, very good trait to learn.
Yes.
One of the things that I was never a super outgoing, kid, even into young adult, that would, I was quiet and I would listen and I would learn, but do things that would make me, quote unquote, scared or make me uncomfortable, wouldn't do. And now there's a fairly good amount of research and people out there saying, you should just try and do things regularly, once a week, that make you completely uncomfortable. In other words, some of the ones I've heard are like, go into a public building and just lay down on the ground for a minute maybe, and watch what people will do, right? Some people will freak out, go away, not watch you, point at you, take pictures, right? Or another good one is go into a business and just flat out ask, maybe it's a Starbucks, and ask for a free coffee. And coffee for free? Like, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to say no, right? And to understand that putting yourself into a situation that you're not comfortable in, when really the risk is very low. Like, what is the worst case scenario? Not much. So try it, because as you go into those situations and you experience that things, even though you might feel are humiliating or scary, as you put yourself in those things and you learn and you go through them, pretty soon it stops causing so much of a pull on your brain, and you're able to think clearly even in those situations. It's a fascinating thing to try. And that's what this trip can be, right? They might be petrified.
I don't think many of these kids going down can swim.
Well, I don't think many of them have probably had access to a place to where they could swim. and I could be wrong, because there's the Carver Center pool and there's the Warner Park pool. It's not far away, but them being able to get from that place from home to that place may not have been as easy, or they may have had somebody in their ear that's telling them, you don't need to go swimming because you're going to drown. Because the person that they trust may fear swimming or water or whatever, and so they've kind of passed that fright on to the child.
You know, I saw that a lot in Johnson City when it came to thinking outside the box and doing anything with an exception of just giving praise to God for everything and staying safe. And so I watched religion really shackle a lot of people from the standpoint, and family members of mine that could have just basically done anything, but because they were just taught to give everything to God and turn it over to Him, then it led to not attempting to do anything, because by not going to the pool of life, they wouldn't drown, but they were drowning and not
Mentally.
right.
Yeah.
And I could see that in so many ways, and I just wonder if that happens a lot over here, because people hear gunshots and they think if we don't apply and we don't try, then we'll stay safe.
Perspective.
I think it happens everywhere, and the scenarios and what that occurrence is. Maybe not a gunshot somewhere, but another. Any other situation in any community, there's always places that you just say that I think people are hearing, seeing, and just ignoring, or trying to say, well, it's not my problem, until it is.
I think in some aspects, religion may play a strong part in some issues, but because with the generations being so close, a lot of people were raised by their grandparents. I had a lot of influence from my grandfather growing up. My mom had me when she was 14, and him being my grandfather and being the male role model, he was the one that I listened to or dealt with more so than my mom even, and in a lot of cases growing up. And I would venture to say that in this community, a lot of grandparents had a lot of influence on a lot of the children that are walking the streets now. With that being said, the grandparents attended a lot of the churches. If you count the churches per capita in this area, it is saturated. And in some places, there's a church every other block. So there's a heavy religious setting here, but from grandparent to grandchild to great-grandchild, I think down the road, the understanding and the perception of religion has probably shifted. People aren't so scared of one thing as they are the other. And that's probably due to technology.
Well, and I wonder if I don't want to isolate churches either with the fact that I have such a difficult time personally with organized religion, from just being a female to understanding how it can stagnate people, and really analysis paralysis kicks in. And then from that point, from the analysis paralysis mode, you can certainly see the isolation comes next, and then mental illness. I've seen this many times in people of all different ages and colors, and then it seems like the self-medication arm of that comes really at the end of that, because they can't endure the isolation that they subjected themselves to because it feels like there's only one way or this way. And I think over here, one of the things that really I want to get across is that I want to empower kids to be like your way, but also get them to understand they are riding in a raft going down a river.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Religion has its place, like with everything else, and like with everything else, you're gonna have your good aspects of it, and you're gonna have your bad. That's where you from your terrorists to your holy thumpers. You know, you're gonna have the pros and cons about it. But I think it has its place because with religion, if some people didn't believe in something, if they didn't believe that when they died they could go either to heaven or to hell, there's no telling what kind of person that person would be. The reason that they're not robbing banks or they're not shooting people or they're not cheating on their taxes is because they believe in a God or a supreme being that's going to hold them accountable for that. And so that's a good thing. We definitely want that. The other aspect of that is the religious people that tend to hold religion when it's convenient for them.
That's most of what I see. Right? It's like you can literally find a verse in the Bible to support whatever you want. Right? It does not matter.
Well, I mean, we're talking about prosperity preachers. You know, you watch Joel Osteen and you look at his balance sheet in Houston, Texas. He's certainly got the density to sell these people whatever he wants to sell them.
Yeah.
But that when I watch Joel Osteen and I listen to his message, there are things that I can pick out of his message, if isolated, really resonate with certain things that I believe in. But having said that, I just fundamentally believe that the organization of religion into a corporate status has eroded the messenger, which...
I think that if Jesus wore rags and did a lot of walking, I'm skeptical when you have multi-million-dollar mansions and these nice cars and trying to collect $300 from 30,000 people to buy this jet to travel back and forth across the world. I'm skeptical because just like you said, with the $1,000 suit, would you jump in the pool for that $1,000? Would you jump in the pool for that kid with that suit on, or would you take the $1,000 that you would have spent for that suit and send it off somewhere to help a lot of children? And still, if you walked by the pool and saw that kid jump in, that's my thing, and that's where I'm looking for that preacher that drives a Pinto, that lives in a 400 square foot house, that preaches for free with no salary, no anything. He does everything in his power to give and to show by his leadership and who he is that this is the way that you should live.
Why's it gotta be a guy?
It can be a girl. It can be a
Yeah, and I think
it can be whoever.
Is
I
that
think those
just a
people
pronoun?
certainly. I think those people certainly
That was me on
out there.
autopilot.
Yeah.
And I think
Trust me,
that's.
I do the same thing.
And I think that's a big part of bringing it back to Archway too, right? We can lead by example
Yes.
and help pull kids.
So we
Yeah.
shouldn't
And we can
cuss.
also say
Shouldn't cuss.
we can also be that
I love
avenue to the community and maybe the nation and the world to say, hey, here's another place, another way that you can donate your time, money, equity, whatever, that actually makes differences.
Yes.
Right. Again, you don't want to throw money at the wind. You want to make sure that anything you're doing is helping.
Well, this is our third podcast, and I've never seen Devin draw a circle and dot, and L. I
That's
don't.
3 o'clock.
Oh, it's 3 o'clock. Oh, is he telling us we are going long?
But you know what though?
That's Mr. DJ giving us our signal, and
I
everybody
know.
out there is like, what the? Oh, but we're not going to cuss. You know, I have this fundamental principle when it comes to cussing, which is that it wasn't in the Ten Commandments, other than don't take the Lord's name in vain.
Yes.
So I have always felt like cussing was very doable because it wasn't a commandment. And the Constitution, which is basically, what's the word after something happened? Because really our Constitution is based on our Bill of Rights is based on the Ten Commandments, just in a more legal artistry.
Exactly.
And it also encourages freedom of speech. So I've always thought cussing, but I think that what you're saying, Carlos, more than I'm looking at Andy right now, is
And he's
not
just as important.
cussing establishes a layer of respect.
Well, I think if we go back to when dealing with the kids in the community here, absolutely, we want to showcase that there's no need for cussing. In podcasts, I think it's perfectly fine.
Well, wasn't it Johnny Carson that told Ellen DeGeneres, if you keep your act clean, everybody will continue to buy? The moment you go and infiltrate it with, it dilutes your message once you cuss. And so it's interesting. But
I did comedy, and I heard that for a long time.
That if you cuss
That if you clean your show up, that you're going to get more work. But now the people that cussed have made the larger impacts. Your Red Fox, your Richard Pryor's.
Is there something about cussing that makes it feel more genuine?
Cussing is that thought that everyone sees something, and you have a lot of people that will see it and think it, but that one person that says it is the one that you laugh at because you can relate to that.
Yeah.
Right?
They're saying what you're thinking.
They're saying what you're thinking.
Right. You might have enough restraint not to say it, but they're saying it.
Exactly.
I think that's the draw.
They're the wild card.
They say depression is anger turned inward. I've always thought cussing is anger turned outward.
Absolutely.
And so you could not have to murder someone. And my grandmother, the one that drank beer all the time and was probably the most influential person outside of my other grandmother, who was Christ haunted and totally had Jesus on her wing. It took me to Tammy Faye Baker and Jim Baker's place, not once, 3 times.
Did she really wear that much makeup?
I never met her personally, Tammy Faye Baker. My Christ haunted grandmother she just loved the Lord and all aspects of giving. She just felt like that was the best place in the world. And the funny thing is after Tammy Faye Baker and Jim Baker, came out of their wonderland down there outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, they became like the greatest people to the gay community and transgender people, because they weren't afraid of them, because they had kind of looked like them for years. Like I'd go to a gay club and I'd be like, they kind of dress like Tammy Faye Baker, because I used to watch PTL in the 80s, and then a friend of mine took me to a gay club here in Chattanooga, and they had the drag show, and I was like, the most amount of makeup I've seen outside of this room is on PTL. So the parallel similarities between those shows were just amazing. Have you ever met a real effeminate but very religious gay man, and you're like, that's kind of like a little bit interesting, because I would make an assumption he's gay, but then he begins to tell me that he believes in all things Lord, and he serves the Heavenly Father, and believes that gay people are going to hell.
But with that being said, to my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, to my understanding, there's always been a homophobia within the religious society across the map or whatever. But the sin is not the person, but the act, right? The
actual sexual act?
The actual sexual act is what I was always understood to be the sin. The person being effeminate or wearing dresses or whatever, they're still God's child. So we should still love them.
Are they not God's child once they...
Well, they're still God's child, period. But the actual sin, from what I was raised to understand, or from what I gathered in my own understanding, was not the person's and their personality, but the act behind closed doors. Regardless, who are we to judge one another? If we're all God's children, we're all supposed to love God as we love ourselves, then regardless of who that person is and where they come from, should we not still love them?
Yeah, I think that's the whole meaning for us being over here and not becoming a church, right? Because I think sometimes I equate churches to being very judgmental, because it seems like the message is exclusion rather than inclusion.
Only when it's convenient.
Only when it's convenient.
I have a massive soapbox all the time that mostly is only ever heard by my wife
That's how it goes.
about, watching social media, namely Facebook, and how most of the hate and most of the hypocrisy and everything else that I see in my news feed comes from the people that at the same time are spewing out the most religious
Yes.
directives.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They're constantly
Isn't that
posting
a
verses and
conundrum
everything.
when you
And then
see
I
that?
see, wow, and like you hate this race or you hate that, and yet you're trying to feed me how pious you are. I don't get it. So it drives me absolutely crazy that is how some people view religion, because it has nothing to do with it. In my
Well, and
mind.
I have come to find that religion has nothing to do with Jesus and all of his messages. It seems like it's distanced itself further. But I think one of the reasons why we're doing this as we begin to formulate this rafting trip is I felt like we needed to come up with a prayer that would become the Archway prayer, but I wasn't sure if that too could be branded
Let the kids write the prayer.
and let
That
the
would be
kids write the
awesome.
prayer. So, because it feels a little disingenuous for me, because I wouldn't naturally pray at 46 years old in front of a crowd. I do a lot of spiritual work at home or at my office or certainly in my truck. I pray a lot when I'm driving around Chattanooga.
You don't close your eyes, do you?
I mean, I don't close my eyes, but when I see people driving next to me and I think they are eating a sandwich and texting, I begin to pray. I don't know if it's just innate or something. I pray for them. I pray that no one in my family is on the road right now. And so I think that one thing that as we begin this formula over here, we need to establish, but I don't know that I want it to be the Lord's Prayer because, you know,
No, I think that's a
we
great
can let a
idea.
child. We can let a child write a prayer and it be the official Archway prayer, and then have it somewhere up front of the building that when they come in, and it doesn't have to be like this long drawn out 4-page script, but just a few words thanking God for the day, for the people.
And I've seen some great stuff along that lines
Yeah.
where even you don't even,
That'd be
if we want to avoid some of the connotation of prayer, right? It's just a accumulation of phrases and words that we want to live by.
A mission statement.
Yeah, a mission statement. And all those things are really prayers, and we can very organically have the kids come up with some phrases that they think should reflect what this is and what they're doing and what we're doing, and then we piece them together into a nice piece of prose or whatever else that looks good.
so hey, now I've got this, and I think this is the last thing we're going to say because Devin's telling us we're now at an hour.
His L's turned into a V.
I know, it's like we're at 1 minute, 1 hour and 12 minutes, and we were going to try to keep it under an hour. So the final result of this rafting trip as an exercise for what it feels like to be in business for yourself alongside other people that you want to cooperatively do something with is that how about when we have breakfast that morning, if we go next Friday morning, we set up some microphones and ask people, all the kids, to come up and say a few words of enlightenment or encouragement for our trip to be safe. Because ultimately, that when I pray, I'm really looking for some sort of energy or dynamic within myself.
Soul food.
So yeah, soul food, so that I don't go out and hurt anyone else and I don't hurt me. And then my well wishes for please don't let anything horrible happen to my family. Even though I know that I can deal with it, I've been very blessed, knock on wood, I don't know how people who lose a child who is under the age of 25 even, and knowing that the expectation when you have a child is they're going to live to like 80 now. Because our insurance world has told people that you can insure all these people and you can almost ensure that they're going to have this full-fledged financial life through all these safety nets, and yet kids still die of E. coli and pneumonia.
Starvation.
hunger,
Neglect,
starvation, neglect, abuse, and all this thing. And it seems like once we went in this world of just writing an insurance check, and I really come down hard on the insurance people because I feel like they don't tithe back in the way that those people who control those boards do. They institute this code, and then they tell everybody to go build towards it. And the reality is, if they just simply went out and built things within the framework of the marketplace, then people would fragment and they would have less numbers to deal with. I have never wanted a business that employed 2,000 people, let alone 20 people, because I want a business model to be sustainable within someone else. And the thing that feels right is when we are mentoring young people that we pray, even if we don't put a denomination on it. And I think that if we come in next Friday, which I'm hoping you haven't answered whether you're going to raft yet, Carlos. I'm assuming Andy's going to raft. I haven't even thought about Devin, but that's the one thing that came out of this, frankly speaking, podcast today is that can we set up the mics and let the kids participate, and then we can almost do a wrap prayer where we bring it together.
Let's say, just have them say
Absolutely.
thank you. How about that? Thank you.
I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe some people don't feel like saying thank you right now, and so that to tell them to say thank.
But would you agree that everyone has something to be thankful for?
Well, that's what I was telling that guy last night, Brandon, the strong kid, when it was so funny. His buddies were sitting there next to him, his girl and guy buddy, and RJ, the kid that was like, I can't swim. And then Brandon was like, well, what if I fell in? And he was like, oh, I jump in, try to save you. And he go, we drown together. And I said, better together than alone.
I guess.
And he said, and then RJ was like, would you jump in and protect me? He goes, oh, no, I wouldn't. And RJ's having to deal with that. And it was funny to watch that dynamic. And then I said, you're spending your currency all day long. And Brandon said, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, you think currency is money, but in my world, currency is friendship. You see so many wealthy people who have no friends because they're afraid. I'm talking really wealthy people. They're afraid that the only reason that people like them is because they have money.
They saw what they thought was happiness and then lost what was really happiness.
I don't want that to happen to me, no matter how many properties I get. I told my attorney at lunch today, who works at Chambliss and Bonner here in town, one of the oldest law firms in Tennessee, and I said to her, if I ever get to a place where I think of myself as us versus thinking of them, I just want to think of it as me. I never want to lose sight of that, and that's what I was trying to tell that kid last night. There are many ways that you can have currency, and you can be the richest dude in the room because you got two people here that are saying they can't swim, but they would jump in for you. And I think that's the prayer that we're looking for to establish, that you keep your individuality, but you have consideration, right? You have consideration for, and if we can accomplish that, because I was a little overwhelmed yesterday, Carlos, I'm not going to lie, when I stepped in. And then you didn't jump in. I kept looking at you like,
I didn't know my place.
I know, but your place is always to jump in and be like, give me some different perspective.
I do it enough unintentionally. I never try to intentionally put my foot in my mouth. So I try to get a lot of heads up, which I didn't get. I just got a meeting today at 5:15, show up. And I show up and it's like, da-da-da-da-da-da, and I was like, okay. And now she's saying that she wanted me to jump in, and I'm like... That
sounded very military, like there was no structure, there was no plan.
I was there, eyes open, trying to just figure out what was going on.
So I think in what I'm hearing too is maybe when we get the kids before the trip, we can give them a little bit of outline, where Carl's saying they like to say thanks, like put up some words even on the whiteboard that's like to say thanks, to ask for safety, to look for guidance, to
yes, I like that.
Have success. We can give them some words, and then they come up with whatever they want to say in relation to
I knew there was
a
reason why I chose you, man. You look a lot like Jesus. You have the beard, and you're white. And every Jesus I ever saw
always
growing
white.
up was always white.
Yeah.
And now you're coming up with this guidance and everything else. I now know why I brought you along on this trip. with me, this archway trip, this frankly thing, because that was a very philosophical way.
I'll let you know I cannot
I've
walk
told you
on
that time
water,
and time
so
again.
I'm not going to be
So
that.
we need to record that, right? So that's the next podcast. We don't need to do a podcast on Wednesday. Let's just sum this up. Devin, can we work together to do a podcast at 7 a.m. Friday morning while the kids are eating breakfast here, and then we take off to the Ocoee? Can we do that? I am a terrible morning person. I'm not going to lie, but I can definitely do that for the kids and be
It's all
here.
about the kids.
Can you be here at 7 a.m.?
I will make a strong attempt to be here at 7 a.m.
Next Friday?
I'm usually in the river before 6 a.m.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
Walking on
This
water.
would be easy.
Walking on water over there. It's true. That's fantastic, but I would never be in the Tennessee River ever, and you're always in the Tennessee River.
Always.
It's so dirty.
But it's running water, though.
It's moving.
And-
It's moving water.
Moving water, and it's being filtered through rocks.
That's what you mean by saying runny water. As
Yes.
long as it's running, you're going to miss all the crud that's in it.
But you're going to miss some of it.
He swims in it every morning.
But it's better than still water, which grows.
Oh, yeah.
Bad news.
Well, I feel like we got still water over here in East Chattanooga, and we need to get it moving. So let's take these kids on a rafting trip, and let's ask
and
them to
roll.
participate, and let's let you lead, Andy, in the guidance of how to say, look, we want to formulate a prayer so that becomes our archway prayer. Because as far as I'm concerned, when we get this van I'm going to buy, that hopefully I make a deal on today and see if Ford will extend me credit and we can make the deal and get these kids moving around. The reality is that we can take them to movies, but I think we should always pray when we venture out of this building.
Absolutely.
It just feels right. Even though we're not a church and we aren't some religious organization that's tax exempt, we would establish that we have this thing here that we want everybody to understand. There's a lot of, certainly Jesus walking around here. Have always felt that when I've met you guys. I felt it when I met Devin. I just don't know about
DJ.
I just don't know about God, and that's where we'll leave it today. We're trying to help the youth and see what we can do and
I like it.
Sounds
serve
great.
the need first, worry about labeling it next. How's that sound?
like it.
All right.
Perfect.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Amen.